into this question. This is question number 3, but it's relevant to what's going on now. We to go around and get some answers on this. In your own words, what do you recommend that Black people do when facing feelings of hopelessness, despair, mental/spiritual anguish, fear, etc., just due to a regularity of exploitative occurrences at the hand of law enforcement and beyond? This would be the case of anything in society with no perceived justice in sight. I know that's relevant to one's experience, but just once again, in your own words, what do you recommend that Black people do when facing feelings of hopelessness, despair, mental, spiritual anguish, fear, etc., due to a regularity of exploitative occurrences at the hands of law enforcement and beyond, with no perceived justice in sight? We can go around, Matt, then we'll circle around.
So before you even ask that question, this is something that was on the tip of my tongue as something I wanted to contribute. And I think that this is what I'm hopeful for with, Black Lives Matter and the movement as it stands today. I think, what do you do? I think you have to understand the parameters of the game. Forgive the choice of word there, but like the game that's being played here, and it's governance and it's government. And I think that what I'm hoping happens with this movement, and part of why I think I'm particularly fired up for this cause, and I want to do what I can to play a role in it, is, I think if we look at, and somebody correct me if I'm off here, but it's anecdotal, but I think it translates well to this subject. You look at, how the Jews have been persecuted, almost since the dawn of time. And I think part of what helped them find footing in the world was they had sway over government, and they had a lobby, they had representation, they had a group, an organization that influenced government for their particular best interest, Jewish people. And I think that you have to step into that arena if you want to accomplish change. And I think Killer Mike, and forgive me for always referencing this, but I think he's really onto something. In his speech, I think maybe May, June, he's like, you have to mobilize, organize, and all those things. And I think you have to develop a substantial footprint in politics. If you want to accomplish change in government and how laws are applied in this country, that's where you have to be. And I think that independent of that, I know Adam would be the first person to say, like, you're tired of it, it's time to burn something. And I hear what you're saying. I do. I hear you. I do. But the thing is, when you burn, you give the opposition the license to point your cause out as a problem or problematic, and you take the wind out of your sails. Because when things start burning, that's when the government, the establishment, points to you and says, see, that's why we can't fuck with y'all, because you're burning. And I think that is where we need to be to move things forward. It's a government footprint.
Okay.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it, and it's along the lines of what Matt said. I think you have to garner circumstantial influence, meaning, no, I guess what I'm saying is that if you're waiting on people's better natures for things to change, I think we've been waiting a long time, and I think we can argue all day about why it is the way that it is. But at the end of the day, people's better natures are not going to be the thing that changes what I think we all on this call agree is an issue, right? Like, I almost take this thought, I don't know where I heard it recently, but it's like, I saw something to the effect of like, they don't have to love you if they need you, kind of a thing, right? And like, and it's in line with what Matt said, right? It's like, go out there and make a tangible difference and own your parts of the sort of the broader structure. And guess what? Things will change your way by virtue of you having a bigger stake in how things change, or a voice in the room, or by the simple fact of people seeing it and recognizing that as a collective, whatever your collective, Black, gay, this, that, that you have the ability to organize and enact some change. So I said it, and I don't know if this phrase, like, captures it well, but, garner like circumstantial influence, gain the ability to truly, truly contribute to how these things like redlining and, the accountability of police when there's questionable activity, how those things get like applied. I think that's the only reaction, in fact.
Okay. Anybody else want to
Yeah,
take a jab at it?
Yeah, I look at things as a multitude. Well, not a multitude. It's just overall like a society. I mean, what society is built on. I go back to what they call the 7 pillars. I call them the 6: media, religion, government, business, education, entertainment, and the 7th that they say is family. But I see society as a family itself. We are one family. As human beings, we are one family. That's the piece that we have to come to. But now, when you look at the other 6 and how they're used to so-called separate the family, maldistribute the power and the wealth, then we have to look at how those 6 play into it and how we can come together as a people, specifically Black and brown people, because that's the power is the power and the resources are already under the authority of the white population. That's the reality. But now, how do we do? Then we have to look at those same 6 areas and apply them to building ourselves up. First off, our expectations, our worth, our self-image as individual and collective, and that we value ourselves again. And again, that value there's a process that broke it down. We have to look at developing process to build it back up. And so once we build our value up in our own minds, then from there, power and authority comes along with that. But that's why I have I have an issue with just talking racism and problems, and not dealing with, okay, what processes are we going to now look at in getting out of this? Because it is a process, and it's highly unlikely that it's going to work out within my sons, grandsons, and great-great-grandsons' lifetime, that it's totally worked out. But we start and understand that it is process and that it is a multi-layered, and those six pillars, that we actually look into how we move in those 6 pillars.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a jab at that question?
Adam, you got nothing here, bro?
No, I was gonna say I actually pretty much agree with Matt that it's like voting and influence, which is a combination of Matt and Richard, really, like voting and influence. I mean, I take a little issue with like the comparison to like Jews, just because it's a very different situation. You can hide your Jewishness. You can't hide your Blackness, right? There's a unique experience to Blacks that the Jews didn't necessarily experience in the United States. So there are differences, but I think generally speaking, vote, right? But I think this also ties into like the previous question, why I was taking issue with what Charles had said before, is because if it sounds like everyone's pretty much on, like everyone in some way or another has mentioned the same thing, right? Influence, vote, being able to change like this structure by some fashion. And so when you say something like that, there's nothing systemic about issues. When you say things like that, it's like, well, when voter turnout is suppressed, whether it be like in Florida with something like that, or if it's minimizing polls in Black neighborhoods or XYZ, they're effectively attacking the way that everyone on this call is saying we need to impact the change. So that's why I say you can't always divorce these things, right? Like we all say you got to vote, influence, that's how the change is coming. They're trying to stop you from doing it, right? They're over there purposely enacting laws, legislation, and rules to stop you from doing the thing that everyone on this call is saying we need to do to make things better. That's systemic. That's a problem. So we can't just like say like, get out and vote. It's also, we got to address those issues too, right? It's a combination of both.
Yeah. Okay. Charles, you got your hand up next. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I hope I didn't misrepresent myself here. I agree with everything you said, Adam. But I just want to flag one thing though, which is Coleman Hughes references a study that talks about because achievement in the Black community distributed across nationality. Okay, and assuming the study is valid, I implicitly trust Coleman Hughes, but basically, Blacks of Caribbean descent tend to outperform Blacks of American descent, of like mainland American descent, in like achievement and like getting into government and these different things. And that takes apart, I think, your argument of you can't hide your you don't have to worry about hiding your Jewishness. Like people that are Black from the Caribbean are just as Black as somebody from mainland United States. And so that speaks to mindset more than somebody looking at your skin and blocking you from doing things. And so I think we really agree. I just would take issue with saying that like the Jewish like comparison is different because Caribbean people can't hide their Blackness anymore, but they're having different outcomes.
Yeah, I would say we're talking about slightly two different things, right? Like when I say you can't hide your blackness, when you can't hide your Blackness, I'm more referencing something like implicit bias, right? Like if someone is hiring somebody for a job and two people walk in, and I'm not going to get into this whole conversation on employment discrimination. I'm just using it as an example. You got two people coming in, one guy's Black, one guy's Jewish, and this person has an implicit bias against Black people. Let's say he has an implicit bias against both, right? He hates Blacks and Jews. Well, he doesn't know that guy's Jewish.
Easier to enforce.
He knows I'm Black, right? He knows I'm Black. He's not like wavering on it, right? So like, there's what I mean is like there's certain contexts, like living in the States, where being Black, there's issues that are very unique to Blackness that doesn't transfer over to other marginalized groups. That's very unique to just being a Black dude or a Black person generally. I don't mean that to say that like Black people can't climb through, and I do agree with you, right? Like that actually, as you were before you even said as you were walking through it, I was thinking, well, yeah, like people in the Caribbean, their mentality and their experience being Black is very different from being in the States. I mean, you just think about my mom. Like I remember back in the day, she used to always say, like when she first moved to the States from Trinidad, she didn't know of like this like she didn't really get race relations right like that, right? Like she didn't understand like this Black white like beef because she grew up in the islands, right? And she lived her whole life in Trinidad where pretty much everybody looked like her, you know, from Black and Indian side, yes, but like you know, she didn't have these issues. So there's a certain level of there's a difference, right, when it comes to Caribbean people coming over versus someone who was born and raised in those systemic issues that, to kind of play on what Steve was saying before, kind of breeds a certain mentality in you because you've lived it your whole life versus someone who comes from like Nigeria, right? Because you know Nigerians come over and they do particularly well. They don't have that mentality. They were born by a lot of Black people and didn't have the same issues that we have over here.
Yeah, and that's all I was pointing to earlier when I mentioned that I didn't think there was an active like as many obstacles as some people believe there are because of that phenomenon, right? Obviously, a mind state can change your outcome, and so that is that's a very different thought than thinking that your color is going to equal your outcome because of a system.
I don't think anyone thinks that there's like this table of like old white men sitting like scheming to like, oh, what can I do today to keep the Black man down? Like I don't think it's working.
I think people do think that though.
Well, I think the majority I think the majority of people don't think that, but I do think that like there's definitely like this systemic issue that disproportionately impacts people that are Black that isn't addressed by the people that are in power that can actually change some of those things, whether you're talking about employment, housing, or like we're talking about today, the judicial system, right?
Yeah. Well, let me say one last thing before we give up our floor. I would argue that to a degree now in 2020, people are going to find that they have more in common with people who share their political beliefs than they do with people of their own race.
I think generally
that is a
correct.
stronger predictor of your beliefs. And that's, again, why I take the position that I do, that these, just like Richard said, like, yeah, maybe Republicans want to stay in power, and one way of achieving that is by suppressing vote. But like the blacks, in theory, the black people in the Republican Party are good with that. They're like, so our political values are going to come out on top? Hell yeah, repress that shit. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I agree. That's a minority of times, right? Like less black people tend to fall into that political like ideology. But I think that is a better predictor of behavior than it is of like, I don't know, how somebody looks.
But it's a slightly different between whites and blacks in terms of it being a predictor, because like the spectrum of whiteness in terms of like your socioeconomic and political beliefs is a lot wider than it is for black people, right? Like the majority of black people are in the same situation and are in the same boat. Yeah,
Agreed.
there's a couple that are out here, right? You're gonna get like some of these more, you're gonna get more affluent blacks and more educated blacks and stuff like. But like you've got a large part of the population, they're all in the same boat, right? So
those policies do screw those people over, and I don't want to take anything away from that, because right. I'm the number one person who's like, yo, we got to change the policies to have these outcomes.
I think that's why they link like that, bro, right? Like, so like there could be a huge discrepancy between like you and a Trump supporter because your worlds are so different, right? Like you and some guy in Alabama, me, or, we're a little bit different. I think me and my brother, because we're a little bit lucky in a lot of ways, but, you take a black dude in Miami, the average black dude and a black dude in, I don't know, whatever, they're dealing with a lot of the same issues. So like, yes, socioeconomic is is a good indicator of like where you're going to land on the political spectrum in terms of your belief. But when you're black, it's very unique. And so you've got like 70 people like, oh, black people always vote Democratic. Like, yeah, man, because all their policies are better for them, right? Like they're universally better for like this large swath of the black community. So like,
I agree.
Yeah, they're not gonna go vote for you. You're not speaking their language, bro. Like you ain't saying nothing good for them.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Okay. We got Steve, and then we got Adam. I mean Matt.
Matt. Yeah, rolling back a little bit, because when you brought up the Caribbeans and others, black people that come to America, that to me speaks to the condition that takes place, because you're coming in, they're coming in fresh. They haven't been exposed to what we've been exposed to here, that actually breaks down your expectation as far as what you could achieve as a black person in America. Does that mean that you can achieve it? No, but if you break down a people's expectations, if the things that you see in media and everywhere else that and so many other areas of the society, breaking down your expectations. I mean, growing up, even I keep using my neighborhood. Just the mere thought of, I'll say the height of the expectation was to work for the city, and be it sanitation, roads, or some of that nature. Upper management, CEO of a company, all these other expectations that so many of my white peers had. That wasn't a part of that community. And then to have those thoughts introduced to you, and then you bring it back to your community, to have those thoughts of excellence and achievement introduced to you, you bring it back, then you're ridiculed because of the conditioning. Whereas you have those in the Caribbean, Nigeria, and other places, that excellence is expected. It's expected day one. So when you come, so now that you've gone through the most precious years, and you come into America, it's harder for the conditioning to take effect, because you've already gone through those precious teen years. Well, the so-called birth to 5, and then the teen years that are so influential in actually establishing your mindset and what you're going to move forward with. So yeah. So with that, these are some of the things that we have to look at as far as undoing, so that we can really start conditioning people for excellence. So that to get rid of the ghetto is to get rid of the mindset, not the people.
That's what I wrote down here and circled was mind state, because I think that's the core, and the policy should reflect that.
Yeah, no, again, it's going back to that earlier, the mind frame. And I think we have to really, and I think society as a whole have to be realistic about examining the psychological impact, like Steve is saying, the conditioning and learning. When we talked about a little bit, Charles, but we're bringing up the subject of behavioral sciences, why people do the things they do. The lack of confidence breeds low self-esteem. Low self-esteem brings low self-reliance. You don't feel good about yourself, you ain't gonna really be productive. Things are put in place. Like, for instance, just a small example. Living in the hood, growing up in the hood, I never see those hood corner stores that grew up in no other neighborhoods. When you just go to the store and it's like somebody usually from somewhere in the region of either Eastern European or quote unquote Middle Eastern descent. I never see these stores that have all this badass food, like the worst kind of shit, all pie. I never see them in like certain neighborhoods, more white dominant neighborhoods, especially ones that are moving forward with money. I only see those particular kind of stores and some of those products specifically in those stores, like the hot pickles, the quote unquote, the hot sausages. Steve, you know what I'm talking about? Like, it's some stuff that I never see this shit nowhere else but in the hood, like the black neighborhood.
Pickled boiled eggs.
All this and then now that I got educated, I learned the physiology of how food works and on a cellular level with food. I'm starting to see like, okay, this is what I'm looking at the landscape. I'm seeing a pattern. Oh, this is a part of the fucking problem. This is a part of it. Like you don't see certain things, and I think that plays part in conditioning, the psychological trauma, the mental sickness, and the mental and spiritual enslavement. And then it leads to an identity crisis, because if you don't have an identity of what you are as a living organism, how are you going to know what you're supposed to do or what direction you're supposed to go? You're still in limbo in the question about what you are, not who you are, because who is more of a personification, like what you are. When you talk about the roles of men and women, and children, and family. Like, these things are just looked over as if they're just glossed over by so-called, people that come together and trying to speak at the table to trying to find the solutions to the problem. We have to really, I think, put a lot of weight into psychology and just the dumbing down when you start to understand like how resentment works and frustration and anger. The experiences like Charles we were talking about before when I brought the armature works thing, like me and my sister, like the nuances that you, unless you're like living and it's embodied inside of you, you don't feel. There's no data to come to it. So this psychological conditioning and this devaluing and lowering of confidence through certain imagery, and you have low expectations. Like Steve said, I just want to be a city worker, just working. I just want to be just my parents always taught like just get a good job. That was like the epitome, a good job, whatever that really means. I'm like, and then you're doing good in life. Like, and I'm like, and I got older, like, damn, man, like their expectations were so short. And then I had to examine their life and their experiences to make them see why they even thought that I was like so high. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just a worker for somebody else. Not to knock anybody that does that, because everybody has a role in life. I'm not knocking anybody, but that is the expectation. That's just, and you're just satisfied with crumbs off the table. And if you add anything outside of that, y'all hit that sound crazy? Okay,
I think I just switched from my headphones to the computer recently, and I think there might be mic feedback. Let me see if I can.
Good. I'm good now. I think I think I'm regular.
Good.
Yeah, like we definitely have to play up. No, we're talking about a lot of external systems, and but people make up systems, and the mind frame, like that goes back to that word, the mindset and the mind frame. Because if these problems have been going on for like hundreds and thousands of years, it's not about an individual. Obviously, if it's still alive and breathing, it's being passed on. It's a mindset. It's a mind frame. It's a way of looking at life. A perspective shapes your reality. Like I said, I just brought the example with the stores and just was looking at that and looking across the board. Another example, the virus is supposed to hit, everything shut down. I play a lot of ball. I play basketball, especially I go to the hood on the Sunday mornings. I try to go when this shit first hit in March. Yeah. They took the basketball goals off the backboard. I'm like, damn. You know, I think it's everywhere. A couple of weeks, man, I'm just riding around in Hyde Park. Like about 3-4 weeks later, it's a dude out there playing ball, man. And then I was like, what the fuck? Like, and then I went to another white neighborhood, and the rims are still up. And I'm just like, see, where's the data on this shit? You know what I'm saying? Like this is what I mean about, like, that's why I feel a lot of black people get so angry. They just want to just slap somebody in their damn face when they start hearing all this technical shit. And I feel because I'm just giving you some real examples. So what do you draw? What conclusions do you draw when you keep seeing? This is just 2 things I just gave y'all. I'm talking about this is on top of like 1 million. Since I've been like, I was born and raised right here in Florida. So all of this stuff you don't see, I'm like, so they can play ball? They can play ball, but we can't play no ball, huh? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, that's crazy, but they out there just hooping, they chilling. I'm like, I got to go play with them if I want to go play. You know what I'm saying? So just an example why they took them off. So just little stuff like that little them hood stores, they're always owned by a certain demographic of people too, and they always serve certain elements of foods in those stores. This is if you're not around it, you're not privy to seeing this and living it, you don't know. That's why I think the most important things of what we're doing is talking about this stuff and bringing the education, because when you start to learn of these little intricacies, it has to shape your perspective, or at least to a degree, to be like, damn, I didn't know that. Let me listen a little more, because a lot of people, like, well, I can't definitely definitively say this or that. And I agree. You don't know, because you haven't lived it. The only way to know it is to live it. Other than that, it's just a theory or a concept. But there are some people that have lived it and know. And I would think that the people that don't know by their own recognition to listen and learn from the people that do know. These people that are saying that we're not thinking, we're not believing, we're knowing from life, real life experience. Well, let's lead up to this.
Got anything to jump in.
Let's lead up to. Oh, go ahead.
Was anybody have anyone want to react?
Well, I mean, shit. I had something I wanted to say, but like I feel like Mike was just dropped there. So I feel like Charles respond, because I don't want to redirect the conversation.
I don't have to respond.
I agree.